Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny Appleseed Organic. With its balanced NPK ratio, secondary micronutrients, and cutting-edge microbiology, Climate Guard is the most nutritionally complete organic fertilizer on the market. No wonder it has a 4.9 out of 5-star rating with over 350 reviews. Visit johnnyappleseed.com to try the fertilizer everyone's talking about and enjoy 10% off your purchase with code TAKE10 at checkout. That's code TAKE10 at johnnyappleseed.com.
Make the most of your time in the garden every day with a Fine Gardening magazine subscription. This holiday season, we're running special discounts you won't want to miss. Go to finegardening.com and click subscribe to claim your holiday savings.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm the associate editor at Fine Gardening magazine.
And hello, loyal listeners. I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the executive editor here at Fine Gardening magazine. And I feel like I need like trumpets. Do, 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 do. It's our 100th episode. Yay! Who knew that 3-ish, maybe more years ago, when there was this little inception of an idea of, hey, we're Fine Gardening magazine, maybe we should do a podcast, we would be 100 episodes in. And yes, I can't believe there's still plants to talk about this morning. So Carol, I'm going to cheers you from afar. We have our beverage of choice, and I'm not going to lie, I've got some Prosecco going on in my champagne glass. What do you got going on over there, Carol?
It's seltzer. That's the only bubbly thing I had. I'm sorry. This snuck up on us, right? Yeah.
It really did. It really did. I sent an email to Carol and said, holy cow, it's 100 episodes. We should probably do something. So here, I'm cheersing you. Cheers. White wine at 9 a.m. Yeah, buddy.
Breakfast of champions.
That's right. I'm going to get my Wheaties afterwards. So, we didn't really want to theme anything out for the 100th episode. We wanted to acknowledge it. And thank you guys so much for, listen, subscribe, and rate our podcast. That's always helpful. But we didn't really come up with a whole episode around 100 plants. But Carol, you had a great idea, and it was to answer a question, right? And what question was that?
If you could get 100 of one plant to give out as gifts to everyone, what would it be?
Which I think is pretty awesome, because 100 of a plant, of one singular plant, that's a tough one, because everybody likes plants. And, I even thought about, there's a few that I would like, 20, maybe even 50, but 100 plants is a lot of plants. So you're going to have to think about perfect strangers, friends, family members, random folks. So I thought that was really interesting. So 100 plants, Carol.
Yes.
What did you choose?
So you need a real crowd pleaser for this. And also, a lot of my friends live in very cold climates. So I wanted something that could be grown all over the place. And my choice was Raydon's favorite aromatic aster, which is Symphyotrichum oblongifolium. Raydon's favorite.
Say that 5 times fast.
Oblongifolium. And that is hardy from zones 3 to 8. And it is super, super adaptable. So every person on my 100-person list could grow it. And moreover, I think every person would be happy to get it. It's not a huge plant. It gets 3 feet tall, 2 feet wide. So everybody is going to have room for it. It has a beautiful mounding habit. And most of the year, from spring until autumn, it looks like, this pretty bushy little mound of green foliage. And, you know, maybe because we are taping this so late in the year, it is on the top of my mind, but it has the most spectacular flowers in like mid-October to mid-November this
Oh,
year.
wow. Yeah, that's super late.
Yeah, so it started blooming for us here on October 14th. And from my Facebook feed, I know it was also blooming in Nacogdoches, Texas. And Jared Barnes is an author. He's also a professor at a college, and he and his students planted it, and he took pictures of its first year of bloom. So at the same time as it's blooming in Connecticut, it's blooming sort of on the other side of the country. It blooms later than the other native asters. This is a North American native, and it blooms like 2 weeks later than similar aromatic asters, which is nice because when the show is over for these other asters, this one comes along. It gives you another month of color. It can grow in all kinds of different soil, alkaline, acidic, rocky, gravelly, which is perfect for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it's not just Raydon's favorite, it's everyone's favorite. And the pollinators love it too.
Yeah, that was going to be my question to you, because it seems like, you know, they're always saying that infuse some pollinator plants that are in the shoulder seasons, you know, either super early in spring when not a lot else is going on, or in late fall, because those pollinators, you know, they really do rely on those, you know, the last little bit of the snacks before that long winter. And this seems like it, you know, Raydon's favorite fits that bill perfectly.
It does. And depending where you are in the country, it can help feed those migrating monarchs on their way to their overwintering grounds. So it's a nice plant, and I love it. I grow it, and I wish 100 of my friends could grow it too.
Well, I'll be the first friend to sign up on your list, because I do not have this aster, and I think I definitely now need it. You've sold me, and now you just need to sell another 99 people on it. Well, I hedged my bets, and unlike you, I'm picking a tree. Because I'm a woody plant person. I mean, if I had my druthers, I would only have a landscape filled with trees and shrubs. I know that that's not practical, but I picked a tree and I hedged my bets, and I just said redbud. Just a redbud tree. And that's Cercis, any species, any cultivar, zones 4 to 9. So it does, you know, span. I was thinking about the same thing. I need to get a wide zonal range if I'm going to have 100 people and saddle them with a tree. But I love that, you know, there's native options. You know, you could go with Cercis canadensis, which is the eastern redbud. You could go with Cercis occidentalis, which is the western redbud. So, you know, I don't need to point out the obvious of where those native ranges lie for everyone. Are you somebody who lives in an apartment and all you have is a balcony and a whiskey barrel? Well, there's tiny dwarf options. One of my favorites is Lavender Twist Cercis redbud, because it's teeny tiny little weeping form of the redbud, and it actually does really well as a containerized plant. I love a dwarf variety that is actually a Chinese redbud. It is the plant I think I've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast, but it is Cercis chinensis Don Egolf, and that's Don as in Don, and Egolf, which is EGOLF, like the game, like the game my husband plays, unfortunately. But it's the plant that people visit my garden and just, regardless of the time of year, just gravitate towards. You know, in spring, it gets those crazy magenta blooms up and down the bark. It blooms right out of the bark. It gets beautiful heart-shaped leaves. So I have given redbud trees as, you know, memorial trees to people who have lost a loved one, or even as wedding trees, because, you know, it's got those beautiful heart-shaped leaves that it fits the bill. gets great fall color. Usually it turns some sort of reddish orange in winter. There's purple leaved varieties. I know you're a big fan of forest pansy, which is a purple variety. There's chartreuse varieties. There's one called Rising Sun that has a beautiful kind of sunsetty color to its leaves in season. It's a great tree all around. And so I couldn't choose one particular cultivar. So I'd have to, take orders from my 100 people of, all right, you live in an apartment, you get lavender twist. Okay, you're looking for an 8-footer, you're going to get Donnie Golf. So, but I think Redbud would be my 100 plant that I would need.
Well, that's awesome. Sign me up for forest pansy.
Deal. Writing it down.
All right.
All right. Well, so now that we've gotten the 100th celebration, that was kind of lame, but not so lame. We got our 100th celebration out of the way. So that was our little bonus segment. But really, our episode today is wish list plants. We're in December. We're approaching the holidays. We're thinking about what we wish that Santa or our non-denominational gift giver would put in our stocking. And as gardeners, we want plants. So that's not going to happen. So we're going to come up with our wish list instead for ourselves. Carol, I don't know where you landed on things, but I didn't do necessarily all new plants. What did you do?
I didn't do new plants either. In fact, I did one that I already have the seeds, and my wish is that I will remember to plant them next year.
Well, can we hedge the bets, and can I ask you to start with that one? Because now I'm intrigued.
So it is Mexican sunflower. That's Tithonia rotundifolia, and it's an annual. And I did a lot of annuals last season, and it was so much fun. They're really high impact plants from midsummer until frost, really. And I had the seeds for this one, and it's one that you can start in the ground after the last frost. And that's what I intended to do, but I did not do it.
Oops.
And so this year, my wish is that I will do it because I love the color. It's a really nice warm orangey red, which I think goes beautifully with all kinds of different colors. I think it goes well with chartreuse and especially like deep purples and blues. And so I want to put this near some salvias that, complement it. And then other warm colors that pick up and continue that warm color theme. It's got pretty foliage. It's a sunflower, so you can kind of picture the shape of its leaves, and they're sort of velvety and they're dark green. So even until it starts blooming, it looks nice. It gets tall. It's like 4 to 6 feet tall, maybe 3 feet wide or 2 feet wide. So it's narrow and tall. You probably need to stake it. Pollinators love it. Birds love it. And that's another reason to stake it, because I've read that it has these hollow stems. And when the birds get up in there and start pecking away at the flowers, they can break the stems. And so I don't know. I love the idea of something that feeds wildlife and that I can sort of throw into a boring part of my border and just bring in some of that warm color.
I love Tithonia. That's a plant that I've grown in the past as a cut flower, and it's a little bit challenging as a cut flower because of those hollow stems. You got to be really careful when you're going in and cutting them. You start wrestling with that 6-foot plant, and all of a sudden, you're breaking flowers left and right. But in a vase, Tithonia lasts. It lasts for a long time in a vase, and it was one of my favorite cut flowers to actually grow myself as opposed to buy at the farm stand. But yeah, it gets big. It gets really big. I think I underestimated how big it gets. The one year I grew it, thankfully, it was, against the fence in the back of the vegetable garden. So the fence actually helped kind of hold it upright. But a beefy plant, at the end of the year, I was pulling out a stem that was, probably an inch around. It was more like a stump than a stem. It was cool. But yeah, big fan of it.
Well, cool. What have you got? What's first up on your wish list?
Well, so I feel like I gotta up my perennial game. I'm not doing real well with the perennials. We all know this. Trees and shrubs, trees and shrubs. All right, I need some front of the border action going on. Something in that 2 to 3 foot tall range, and I need more ornamental grasses, and maybe it's just top of mind because we've just come through the fall, and I thought, I need some more texture. I need some more ornamental grasses, and I really love chartreuse, but I've been burned multiple times on the new pennisetums, the new fountain grasses that have come out that have been in that chartreuse range as far as coloring is concerned. I got sucked into lumen gold a few years ago. And let me tell you, this thing has been the most pitiful thing in my garden. It started out as a 4-inch perennial. I think it's now a 1-inch perennial. I mean, it's teeny tiny. It's never bulked up, which you'd expect from a pennisetum to bulk up quickly. This is an ornamental grass that likes well drains, lean soil, full sun. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard. But Brent Horvath, our dear author and friend and plant breeder out in the Midwest, has been working on one called Lemon Squeeze. So that's Pennisetum Lemon Squeeze, and it's zones 4 to 9. So that, I'm still in the game. So that's good. It gets about 3 to 3.5 feet tall and wide, and has this really beautiful mop-like, fountainish, grassy habit. And the blades are fine, and they're chartreuse. And apparently its claim to fame is, from everyone who's grown this now in trials for several years, is that it's the most vigorous pennisetum out there with chartreuse leaves. So I'm going to give it a whirl. The other cool thing is, that it doesn't burn out in sun, because chartreuse, and sun, full sun, there's that fine line between too much, and then you start getting brown ends to the grasses or any chartreuse plant. But apparently no burning, no browning, and copper colored, cattail like plumes in mid to late fall. So I'm going to give it a whirl, and I'm looking forward to seeing it prove me wrong that all chartreuse pennisetums suck. I think Lemon Squeeze might have the potential. So that's a new one that's on my list this year, and that's Pennisetum Lemon Squeeze. All right, Carol, what's up next on your list? Annuals, perennials, woody plants?
I've got a perennial next, and it is another North American native. And nice. I think Kelly Norris tipped me off on this one. It is flowering spurge, Euphorbia correlata, zones 5 to 8. I love the alternate name, which is redneck baby's breath, and and it's not, this is something that there's a small contingent of plant nerds that call it that, but that gives you an idea of what it looks like. It is a euphorbia. And so it has those sort of, glaucous leaves that a lot of them have. But the main attraction for about 6 weeks in mid to late summer are the flowers. Now, actually, it's not the flowers that are spectacular. The flowers are like little yellow discs, but they are surrounded by white bracts that look like petals, and just tons of them. So it's like this cloud of white. It gets 3 feet tall, about 18 inches wide, and it likes full sun and very, very well drained soil. In fact, it will probably flop if the soil is too moist or too rich, but very adaptable if your soil is poor. And it's just what I like about this is that it will go with anything, and that it's sort of a filler that ties the colors together. So I'm thinking, like where that Mexican sunflower is, where colorful flowers are, you tuck a few of these in, and you've got this like fresh white for multiple weeks. So that's the one for me.
This plant is very cool. I think I've seen it in Millennium Park, kind of in that section that's very High Line-esque, out in Millennium Park. They have that very Pete Udoff area that it's a knitter plant. It kind of has these clouds of white that just make everything around it look good. And man, that you can't lose with a plant like that just makes everybody around it look better, basically.
Yeah.
And euphorbia, I will say, one of the most pest resistant plants out there.
Yes. In fact, because it's toxic, right? Deer really cannot eat it. Rabbits will leave it alone. Gardeners should wear gloves handling it because the sap, it's like a point in the poinsettia, same family with poinsettia. So that milky sap, if you get it on your skin, it can be an irritant. But also, it will poison the deer if they try to eat it.
That's right. And the voles. I have some euphorbia planted right in the super highway of my voles. And it's so hilarious. They take out everything else around it, but they leave my euphorbias alone. And, secretly, the sadistic side of me, I'm thinking, come on, eat it. Just eat it. Try it. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to throw out a perennial for my next plant that I have tried and tested, and now I want more of. And it is a fairly new-ish Spigelia marilandica, and it's called Ragin Cajun. So this is Ragin Cajun Indian Pink is the common name. It is a pretty awesome shade plant. The straight species is really, really awesome. It's got these emerald green leaves. The straight species is about 2.5, sometimes 3 feet tall. It's pretty beefy, but it gets these lipstick red flowers that are I guess it looks like a tube of lipstick, basically, if you were, to twist the lipstick up. But on the very, very tip, it's got a splash of yellow and just a very unexpected color combo for shade. The cool thing about Ragin Cajun is that while the straight species is really a deep, deep, deep red, Ragin Cajun is more of a boiled crab color. It's a reddish orange, and I think it just stands out that much more. But why I truly loved this plant was that it only gets about 20 inches tall and wide. So that's a really nice size, particularly in my limited shade area that I have. I need something that's a little bit smaller than 3x3. I need something that's going to, not eat up as much real estate. I had gotten this plant a few years ago when I had gone down to Plant Delights Nursery down in North Carolina in Raleigh. And at that point, I'm not sure if it was actually on the market yet. It was just a little plug plant. I threw it in the suitcase after I wrapped it up in bubble wrap and brought it home with me. And since then, it's not limped along, but it's put on some size. I didn't do what I should have, which was pot it up and, kind of nurture it along to a larger size. I just shoved it in the garden and basically forgot about it. But this year it had bulked up pretty considerably. It had gotten to probably about 20 inches, maybe 18 inches or so. And it looked great. It was awesome. And it started blooming, I would say probably late spring for me, and just kept blooming and blooming, and then sporadically put on a few blooms all the way through summer, which was awesome. And the hummingbirds went absolutely bananas over this plant. It's not that typical tubular shape, but just that color just attracted them like there was no tomorrow. And it was really fun to see them just go absolutely bonkers over this cute little plant. It zones 5 to 9. It prefers full shade and humus-rich soil. I do not have humus-rich soil. That might be why mine took so long to bulk up. But again, that's Ragin Cajun Indian Pink, and it's Spigelia marilandica. And don't question me on my pronunciation. I don't need the letters. I know. I'm terrible. All right, Carol, what's up next?
So I can't, let you be the only tree person. So I need
Yes.
more trees. I need more trees in my life. So on my wish list is a Japanese maple called Sango-kaku. And again, I am not sure about that pronunciation
I
of
think
the.
that's spot on.
So it's an Acer palmatum cultivar. It grows from zones 5 to 8. It's a small tree. It eventually gets about 25 feet tall, 15 to 20 feet wide, but it will take some time to get that large. So that's what I need. In the spot that I'm thinking of, I want sort of a middle-sized tree to fill in between the ground covers and the larger trees that are right there. This has a broad vase-shaped form, often has low branches. And unlike a lot of Japanese maples where like the main attraction is the leaves, it does have beautiful leaves, but this has coral colored bark, like reddish coral colored bark. And in fact, that is the translation of the name. Sango-kaku means coral tree, I think. So this reminded someone who named it of coral growing up from a reef. And I think that just sounds so cool. So it'll be interesting to look at in the winter, which is when that bark color comes out. Its foliage emerges sort of a yellowish color and then goes chartreuse. And then I think it is yellow with some red in the fall. So you've got all the, the cool foliage all season long. And, it's not too fussy, but it does like rich soil and it should be mulched to keep its roots cool. And in the north here, it probably doesn't need shade, but in the south, it would, in the southern part of its range. I have a question for you, Danielle. The photo had your initials on it in the database. Do you have this one?
That was the first tree I ever bought when we moved to our house 10 years ago. That was my first tree, and it's going strong. It's beautiful. I bought it for all the same reasons that you just said. I will say one tip is this is the most pronounced coral bark comes from the new growth. So it's generally a good maple that to prune in the late winter and to do some selective pruning because then it pushes the new growth through spring and summer. And then in winter, it just looks like it's on fire from all those new tip growths. So, although Japanese maples don't need to be pruned generally, as we just learned from an article we were doing, this is one that, definitely does. It is a treasured tree. I love it. I love it so much. So
yes, we'll have a picture of this in the program notes, so check it out. And all of these plants that we're talking about. This one, it's a beautiful photo taken by Danielle of her tree. And I want one too.
Thank you. Yeah, so definitely go to finegardening.com. I know you guys have told us over and over again, we want to see pictures. So the plant list from all of our episodes, as well as photos of all the plants that we're talking about, you get to see there. So, don't crash while you're listening to this podcast in your car and try and write down the names. You don't need to do that. Just go to finegardening.com. So yeah, I want a geranium, a perennial geranium that doesn't let me down. That's all I want in this world, right? I see perennial geraniums growing in other people's gardens and they just look beautiful, whether it's geranium pratense or, geranium, I'm blanking right now. Big leaf geranium, big root geranium.
Yeah, mycorrhizum.
Yes. Cantabrigienses, geranium cantabrigiensis, any of those. I want a geranium that does well for me. So I'm constantly on this search for this geranium. Roseanne petered out for me after several years. I really loved Dark Rider, which was Reiter, which had like the dark foliage and a really, really beautiful little purpley flower. That petered out for me. I do well with Geranium Byakovo, which I think is a Cantabrigiensis, but that's not one of those kind of billowy geraniums. That guy stays small, compact, and little tufted. So there's a new geranium. So I'm going to be a sucker and I'm going to buy it because I really want to try it out. That's called Boom Chocolatta geranium. And that's a geranium pratense, Boom Chocolatta. And that's zones 4 to 8. Again, I'm buying into these trials that have been done on this plant. I think this one might be from Walter's Gardens that was putting this plant out and trialing this, that it's vigorous. That was its claim to fame. It is a dark-leaved perennial geranium that is vigorous and only gains in its vigor over the years, doesn't succumb to winter wet, doesn't die back halfway and then eventually just peter out. But it's big, it's showy, it's 2x2, which is fairly decent size for a geranium. It's got these iridescent violet blooms on it and just beautiful fall color too. You know, those chocolate leaf geraniums, when they get that hit of frost, really almost get these red highlights all the way around the outside of that kind of, palmate leaf that they have. This one just, it looks like it might be my holy grail of geraniums. I just, I have all the hope in the world. Maybe it's this time of year, but I just have all the hope in the world that this Boom Chocolatta might be it for me. The other thing is I learned that there's a Ben & Jerry's flavor that's called Boom Chocolatta. So I'm really hoping that as a free gift, when you buy the geranium, you actually get a few pints of the Ben & Jerry's ice cream too, which will make it all the better. Even if the geranium dies, I'll be happy because I'll have the Ben & Jerry's ice cream. So yeah.
And you get to say that name when someone asks you, right? Boom Chocolatta.
Yes, Boom.
It's just fun.
All right, Carol. So we're down to our last plant, which really it feels like a bonus plant because we started out talking about our 100 plants selection. So we're giving you 5 plants today, people. You're welcome. What have you got for number 5?
So number 5, this is the first one when I knew this topic was coming up. This I wrote down weeks ago. This is a plant that I've wanted for a really long time. It's Gilt Edge Toad Lily. And I don't love that common name, toad lily. They are so beautiful, and toads are cute, but I don't know.
Not beautiful. They're cute.
I think someone also is calling them fairy lilies, which is, that's cute.
Oh, yeah.
But this is a Tricyrtis formosana or formosana. I'm not sure. Gilt Edge. It grows in zones 5 to 8. I got my first toad lily last spring. And it's a Raydon, so a little bit different, but oh my gosh, what a fun plant. And I'd never gotten one before because they're an autumn bloomer. And so it's not really the first thing in your mind when you're plant shopping in the spring. And the regular toad lilies sort of just go through the summer. They look like an unremarkable plant, might even be a weed. It gets like 1 to 2 feet tall, 1 to 2 feet wide, hangs out there. But then you get these flowers in late summer to early fall that are white base with a yellow center and these spots, these gorgeous, like beautiful maroony kind of purple spots on them. Just gorgeous. And that, I want more. But Gilt Edge has another advantage. It has the foliage has this beautiful variegation, which is like an irregular golden to chartreuse edge that goes around the edge. It looks like a little tiny hosta leaf, and it grows in the same conditions that hostas do. So you could actually mix it in with hostas and ferns and full to partial shade, moist soil. I have a rain garden in the shade, and that's where my one toad lily is. And I would love to add some of these so that you get that foliage for the rest of the season when it's not blooming.
I love that, that this cultivar takes, what the one disadvantage of a toad lily is that, that its foliage through spring and summer is kind of unremarkable. Like you said, could be mistaken for a weed, but, then you add a little golden sparkly edge to each one of the leaves and you've got a plant that looks good for, all 3 seasons and gives you that bonus. They look like orchids to me. Have you ever thought that? It looks like
yeah.
orchid. And makes me feel like, all right, we got you, Florida. We've got our own orchids, these woodland orchids that we can grow. Toad lilies, I think, are super cool. There's so, when you get up close on those flowers, there's so much involved. There's spotting, there's, a little itty bitty like yellow stamen generally on the inside. And they're very variable between the blossoms too, that they get some really cool modeling on them. So yeah, I don't think I have any toad lilies. I'm writing that down. I gotta write that on the list.
Now you got another one for your wish list.
Exactly. All right. Well, so I'm gonna end on a woody plant. I know you're shocked, but I'm gonna do a shrub. And it's something because I've been thinking about. I've been gardening in this spot and at my house, this house, for about 10 years now. So I've seen a lot in that decade. Storms have come through and taken down trees. So once shady areas are now sunny. I've also noticed, climate change is starting to affect my garden. There are time periods where we have gone through some really serious droughts. Now, this past year was not one of those years, but in 2019, I noticed that there was a lot of things in my garden that were starting to flag. And without supplemental water, I probably would have lost them. And I'm on a well. And that's just not a sustainable practice to say, all right, there's big swaths of my garden that are going to need to be irrigated in order to make it. So, for years you've heard all of us tout, here in the Northeast, it's really hard to grow Hydrangea macrophylla. And that's because we get late frosts and the buds get zapped. And we've always said, the smarter hydrangeas, Hydrangea paniculata, the panicle hydrangeas, they put on a great bloom show. They're much more, less susceptible, because they flower off of new wood, so you don't have to worry about getting the flowers zapped. You can hack them to the ground. You can let them go and forget them. They're very, very tough. They're a super tough variety of hydrangea. However, I did notice when we had a drought period in 2018 and then a very significant drought in 2019, my panicle hydrangeas, several of them, especially the dwarf varieties that weren't as deeply rooted, were starting to flag really considerably without supplemental water. And these were plants that had been in the ground for several years. So I stumbled across, reading about some new plants that are in production right now, and they're working on at these various different nurseries. This panicle hydrangea called Lil Hottie, which I just love. And it's actually Balpanone, Bailpanone, Balpanone. But let's call it Lil Hottie because that's what it is. And this is a dwarf panicle hydrangea, 3x3, 4x4, full sun to partial shade, not picky about its soil, but its claim to fame is that it was bred to be drought resistant, and it was trialed for several years in Georgia. So this is a panicle hydrangea that is a little bit tougher, and tougher in warmer regions specifically is what it was bred for, and for periods of drought. The other cool thing that I've been reading is that I don't know if this is like the superhero panicle hydrangeas, but it's also supposedly really, really tolerant to temperature extremes. So super cold doesn't bother it either because it's also been trialed out in Minnesota. So, I feel like I have to start thinking smarter about some of my plants and looking at plants that, can take those swings that are becoming more and more regular for a lot of us in the gardening world. So that is little Hottie panicle hydrangea. It is a dwarf panicle hydrangea. And I want to trial it. I want to trial it against a lot of the panicle hydrangeas that I already have in the garden, specifically the dwarf ones, to see if it does a little bit better on the drought tolerant and heat range. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter with his holiday wishes.
I've often thought that the idea of making Kris Kringle a wish list for the holidays was lost on children. After all, as adults, I think we have a much clearer and more precise picture of what we need. If the tradition changed, and this year the grown-ups did the wishing, here's what would be on my list. Number 1, a complete ban on fantastical Zoom backgrounds. It was fun to see my co-workers in a magical forest or outer space 18 months ago, but at this point, I'd rather just see them in a normal chair, at a normal desk, in a normal room. Number 2, reasonable petrol prices. I realise many of us are driving a lot less these days, but I really don't think it should cost a savings bond to go to the grocery store. If that's not possible, perhaps old Chris could lend each of us his sleigh once a week to run our errands using reindeer power. Number 3, that the new James Bond will be Jodie Comer. I know, big ask. But if you needed someone to save the world from a cadre of nefarious bad guys, why not call on Villanelle? Number 4, that 2022 is a whole lot better than 2020, and better still than 2021. I think that's one we can all agree on. Number 5, that Luton Town Football Club post a winning record this season. I had to sneak that one in, couldn't help myself. And finally, number 6, that the lovely ladies of this delightful plant podcast host another 100 episodes. Because, although I do not consider myself a dyed-in-the-wall gardener, listening to them inspires me to, at the very least, stay on top of my weeding. Happy holidays to you, and may all your wishes come true.
Well, I'm pleasantly surprised with Peter, but I mean, that was a very, very heartwarming, but I thought he was going to tell us about plants on his wish list. Those weren't plants. Those were just wishes.
Well, normal people don't wish for plants, I guess.
If that's being normal, I don't want to be normal. Let's see if our expert is normal. I hope she wants to talk about plants.
She's our kind of normal. She loves plants.
Hey, this is Amanda Bennett, and thank you very much for inviting me to be on Let's Argue About Plants. This is a fun podcast. I do listen to some podcasts, and this is one that I like a lot because it is pretty much all about plants. And what a fun topic today as well, plants that I would want for Christmas. And working at a botanical garden, I do have the opportunity to deal with a lot of different plants in my profession. But on a personal note, we built a house and have been living in this house that we built for about a year. And I didn't bring any garden plants with me when we moved. I decided to start with a completely blank slate and really think about the plants that I love and the plants that I really want to bring here to our forever home. And I've propagated some things from both my mother's house and my mother-in-law's house. But there are a few things on my wish list that I do not have yet, and I will definitely be looking to get for my garden. The first is Camellia Fragrant Pink. And this is not a camellia that a lot of people know. And if you look it up, it's not out there online very much. It is a 6 to 8 foot high camellia. It has very small, double pink, really bright pink flowers. And I do love the camellias with the large flowers, but this one, I don't know. I've had it in years past. We've had it at the garden, and I just really love it. It really kind of captured my heart. And it blooms in the winter, December, January, and pretty staunchly hardy for us down here in the South, and partial shade. So that's what here at this new house, I have almost completely full sun. So I'm looking for a spot for this really great camellia. My next one will fit perfectly in my full sun and kind of sandy clay soil that I have here. It's Bootea capitata. Jelly palm is one of my all-time favorites. It's just nothing else looks like it. It's unmistakable. I love the arching blue-green fronds. It's kind of an unexpected look away from the coast, especially I live in central Georgia, so it's kind of unexpected around here. Hardy in the 9 to 11, I feel like I live in that 8B, verging on 9 kind of zone where I live right now. It'll get about 20 foot tall, and I want it right front and center of my front yard, and full sun, like I said. And I do have a sandy clay, so it has good drainage to it, which this palm will love as well. The next one may be a little unusual, or maybe not, but Peach Florida King is the next one on my list. And peaches, most people in the South, or at least in Georgia, have a love-hate relationship with peaches. They don't do great for us without a lot of work, but this particular peach does not need a lot of work. I'll be honest, I learned it at a Jinx Farmer's home, and it has small little peaches, so I know that it will never be, really big on the commercial market. But this one is perfect for me, so you don't have to do a whole lot to it. The peaches ripen a little bit later after some of the diseases have gone through and ravaged some of the others. Doesn't take quite as much just tending to and petting, and it isn't prone to some of the other diseases like some are. Zone 6 to 9, I think it was bred out of Florida, so that is great for me. Full sun and really well adapted to the deep south. My next to the last one, this Gethsemane Moonlight chrysanthemum. Really beautiful chrysanthemum, kind of a buttery yellow, likes the general full sun, good garden soil type of conditions. This one to me is just more sunshiny. It's just kind of bright and not quite as harsh of a yellow as some of those others are. And I don't know, no matter what you put it with, to me, it just automatically makes everything look better, and it looks gorgeous, just covered in bright yellow daisies this time of year. It just makes me smile every single time that I walk by it. Hardy in zone 5 through 9, so you really can't go wrong putting it in that full sun situation. And my last one is Muhlenbergia damosa. This one is going to be one that a lot of people in kind of Texas or, some of those more drier areas are going to be really familiar with. But I can't get anybody to grow this plant, and I can't get anybody to produce this plant in Georgia. And it's one of my hands down all-time favorites. It grows well here, Atlanta and south. North of Atlanta, it doesn't do great, but south of Atlanta, it does do really well. You just don't cut it back here. So, and that's the trick. The landscapers want to cut all of the grasses back. This one will die every time if you cut it back here. And, zone 8 to 10, so it is perfectly hardy here. It's just in how you treat it. Bamboo muley doesn't look like anything else to me. It just has this gorgeous, arching, feathery, just this presence that goes well with everything. I can tell you right now, I'll be planting it with my Gethsemane Moonlight. I have it all laid out in my head, so I know exactly where this plant's going to go. It's a good Southwest native that does well on the East Coast, and I wish more people would know it. But I don't know where I'm going to get it, but I definitely plan to get this plant. Good drainage, obviously, as well, being a Southwest native. So again, my kind of sandy clay that I have here will be pretty good for it. And those are the ones that I have my eye out for next year. Like I said, I'm slowly building my garden back here at our new house. And these are the ones that I have found that I just can't live without. They're some of the first on my list. So thank you again, and I look forward to talking to all of y'all again and hearing what everybody else's wish list plants are.
We got a serious representation of Georgia going on at the end of the show. I talked about a hydrangea trial in Georgia, and our expert was from Atlanta. That's crazy.
Yeah, I love hearing from other parts of the country that can grow totally different things from us. And also sometimes the same things.
Exactly. It makes me jealous. Makes me want multiple gardens. Not multiple houses, but multiple gardens. Starting seeds, staking tomatoes, planting a pollinator garden, or transforming your backyard into a private oasis takes hard work, know-how, and a passion for plants. Unlike most of you guys, I'm always looking for trustworthy advice as well as tips and techniques to make my gardens even better. That's why I know you'll love becoming a member of our growing online gardening community called All Access. The folks here at Fine Gardening are always adding new videos, planting plans, regional expertise, and our hugely popular new project guides, which are all for members only, because every gardener wants to become better at the craft they love. Learn more at finegardening.com/all-access.
Gardeners know best. There's always more to be done, more to learn, and more to enjoy once everything is blooming. Keep your green thumbs growing with the best of fine gardening archives, special interest books, and more. Plus, check out today's deal at tautenstore.com and save 30% in the Taunton store with code PODCAST.